Of course, tomorrow night we're beginning a new year, the new Jewish year, Rosh Hashanah. And a few weeks later, we complete the cycle of reading the Torah. And it's appropriate, therefore, to delve into what Torah is. Ari, are you spotlighted my video? All right, I'll do it now. Great,
I have you are
great,
spotlit for everybody, I believe.
great. So let's just begin simply. What is Torah? Okay, this is something we're all familiar with. You could say that there are different dimensions of Torah, different aspects of Torah. The simplest one is the five books of Moses. Okay, the Torah from Genesis through Deuteronomy. There's also an expanded version of the Torah. You could say that the five books of Moses are the written Torah. The expanded version of the Torah is the oral Torah. Oral Torah is basically all the commentaries that were created around the Torah. This includes the Talmud, the Midrash. In a sense, even what we're doing today is part of oral Torah. Okay, this eternal exploration of the meaning of Torah, trying to expand the meaning of Torah. So we have the written Torah and the oral Torah, but in Kabbalah, we hear about another dimension of Torah. You could call this primordial Torah. In Hebrew, Torah Kedumah. What does that involve? We'll see that pretty soon, but you could get a sense of that from a beautiful teaching in the Midrash. God looked into the Torah and created the world. We find that at the beginning of the Midrash on Genesis. It's very strange. What does that mean? God looked into the Torah and created the world. Does that mean God opened up the Torah, opened up the Bible? He saw Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, let there be light. So God said, let there be light. It probably doesn't mean that literally. It really means, in a sense, God contemplated his own mind. So the primordial Torah is the divine mind. And somehow out of that, out of God's contemplation, emerges the written Torah given to the people of Israel, Mount Sinai, and then expanded into the oral Torah. So let's keep that in mind. Written Torah, oral Torah, primordial Torah. And now let's turn to the Kabbalah. Very simply, I'm sure some of you have studied Kabbalah with me, with other people. You could say roughly Kabbalah is Jewish mysticism. Literally, the word Kabbalah means receiving. That's why it means tradition, that which has been received. But it also means being receptive, being in a receptive mold, in a receptive mood, being open to new understanding. And that's very relevant for expanding the meaning of Torah. Let's move right away to some texts. As Ari said, these will be available to everyone in the chat, and Ari's going to send it out. But I have it here, a shared screen, and for much of the time, I'm going to keep this text on the screen. The ripening of Torah is the theme we're looking at right now. All these texts are in Hebrew and in English. I'll read the English. I might refer to some of the more beautiful expressions in the original Hebrew. So all of these teachings come from Jewish sources. The first page or two are from the Talmud and the Midrash, and then we move into the Kabbalah. As Ari said, if you have questions, just put them in the chat, and Ari will pick out some of them toward the end of our hour together. So this first teaching has nothing to do with Torah directly, but you'll see why we're beginning with it. Fire is 1/60th of hell. Honey is 1/60th of manna. Shabbat is 1/60th of the world that is coming. Sleep is 1/60th of death. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Now, first of all, why 1/60th? It's because this is from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, and in Babylon they worked with base 60, okay, not with base 10. So you could say this is something like saying 1/10, or maybe even 1%. Okay, fire is 1/10 of hell. You think that fire is hot? Well, hell would be 10 times hotter, 60 times hotter. Honey is just 1/60th of the sweetness of the manna that fell in the desert. Shabbat is 1/60th of the world that is coming. Shabbat gives us a taste of eternity, or a taste of messianic reality, a taste of paradise, you might say. Sleep is 1/60th of death. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Okay, there's some wisdom hidden in a dream. Okay, Freud would certainly agree, and Freud studied this passage in the Talmud. Something in the dream can give you insight into your character, into your fears, into your desires, into your personality. So it's a taste, it's a percentage, a fraction of prophecy. So what does this have to do with Torah? For that, we'll look at the next passage, which is from the Midrash. Midrash is basically the rabbi's imaginative unfolding of the potential meaning of the Bible. So here we have a rabbi who speaks of something similar. Instead of 1/60th, he uses the phrase an unripe fruit. Rabbi Chinina, son of Isaac, said there are 3 unripe fruits. The unripe fruit of death is sleep. The unripe fruit of prophecy is a dream. The unripe fruit of the world that is coming is Shabbat. Okay, so what does he mean, an unripe fruit? Something which is not yet in its full form. Okay, it's somehow undeveloped, it's premature. So before we said sleep is 1/60th of death, here it's an unripe fruit of death is sleep. An unripe fruit of prophecy is a dream. An unripe fruit of the world that is coming is Shabbat. But his colleague, Rabbi Avin, adds another 2. The unripe fruit of the heavenly light is the globe of the sun. The heavenly light means the light created on the first day of creation. And now the one that's important for us, the unripe fruit of heavenly wisdom is Torah. The unripe fruit of heavenly wisdom is Torah. It's an amazing statement. What are they saying? Their heavenly wisdom, you could say, is God's wisdom. Now, what does it mean to say the unripe fruit of heavenly wisdom is Torah? You would think that they would say Torah is complete wisdom. Torah is all that you need. But somehow this rabbi feels that the Torah we have is not the complete expression of God's wisdom. That's the radical statement that we begin with. Okay, and we're going to see what happens to that and because of that. First of all, we have a statement in number 3. Here we're actually jumping. I'm just going to come down here. You can see the sources. This is from Moses de Leon. He was the author, the main author of the Zohar. This is not from the Zohar, but from one of his Hebrew writings called Sefer HaRimon, the book of the pomegranate. This is what this Kabbalist says. The sages have said, the unripe fruit of heavenly wisdom is Torah. But isn't the Torah the source of life? How can you say she is unripe? Right? He's shocked that a rabbi would say that there's something unripe about the Torah. What is unripe is inferior, like fruit that falls prematurely from a tree and ripens on the ground. Okay, that's really what the Hebrew word used here means, novelet. Novelet isn't just unripe, it's a fruit that's fallen from the tree prematurely. It's not that it's unripened and it can ripen, it's fallen unripened. Okay, and because of that, it's somehow inferior. It isn't as good as fruit that ripens on the branch. So Moses de Leon is asking, how can you call Torah unripe? Look, the root of Torah is heavenly wisdom, hidden and concealed, perceived only through its wondrous pathways. How wondrous are the offshoots. But since the root is wisdom, who can ever reach it? Concerning this, Israel's sweet singer sang, in other words, King David sang in the book of Psalms, uncover my eyes so I can see wonders out of your Torah. Okay, so Moses de Leon, the author of the Zohar, is saying there is something beyond Torah, that's wisdom. Wisdom somehow gives birth to Torah. It's hard to identify wisdom, right? How can you reach wisdom? Can you really find wisdom? Can you really write it down? Can you put it in your pocket? Can you really formulate wisdom? What we have is the Torah, but it says in Psalms, open my eyes, uncover my eyes, so I can see wonders out of your Torah. In other words, there's a possibility of moving from Torah to wisdom. We can't be satisfied with the simple literal meaning of Torah. We have to penetrate the outer layer. We have to expand the meaning. We have to somehow ripen the revelation that we have in the text. And then we can discover at least a flash, a glimpse of wisdom. Okay, here's a related midrash. Anything in italics here is from the Bible. So this is a midrash quoting a verse from Psalms. One thing God has spoken, two have I heard, for strength is God's. Okay, it's not clear what that means in the simple sense of the verse. One thing God has spoken, two have I heard, but he takes it to mean one verse contains several meanings. Okay, don't be content with one meaning to a verse. Assume that there are multiple meanings, and one of those meanings could lead you to a deeper understanding, to a flash of wisdom. Okay, we move on to a Hasidic teaching, a very radical Hasidic teaching. And let me just give a little background here. There's a question. Let me just stop the share for a second so that we can see each other. There's a question in the tradition, what was actually given to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai? Okay, according to the book of Exodus, the Torah was given, God spoke the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. The tradition says, well, actually, the entire Torah was given at Mount Sinai, okay, which is a little strange because much of the Torah describes what happens after Mount Sinai. And in fact, how could Moses have gotten the entire Torah when the end of the Torah describes Moses' own death? But the rabbis say, well, in a sense, everything was given at Sinai, but a more conservative view is that the Ten Commandments were given. If you look closely at the Ten Commandments, only the first two are in the first person. I am the Lord your God. Don't have any other gods before me. The rest are do this, don't do that, right? Keep the Sabbath, honor your parents, don't murder, don't steal, etc. Maybe only the first two were given by God directly, and the rest God spoke to Moses, and Moses conveyed to the people. Maybe it was just the first commandment. Maybe it was just God saying, I am the Lord your God, and everything else was expanded from that. So this Hasidic teaching is going even further, and for that we'll come back to the text. This is from a Hasidic teacher in the 19th century. I heard from the mouth of our master, our teacher, our rabbi from Rimanov, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, may his memory be a blessing, on the verse, one thing God has spoken, right? That verse we saw here from the book of Psalms. So what does this mean, one thing God has spoken? Perhaps we heard from the mouth of the Blessed Holy One only the letter Aleph of Anochi. Not even the whole first commandment, I am the Lord your God. Not even the first word, Anochi, I am, just the Aleph. What would it mean to have just the Aleph? What's the sound of an Aleph? You might think, ah, but ah is an Aleph with a vowel. Okay, the Aleph by itself would just be opening one's mouth, just the possibility of speech. So this is really the ultimate mystical teaching about revelation. What happened at Sinai was the possibility of communication, the possibility of transmission. All of the specifics are already a commentary on that Aleph. You could say the entire written Torah is the oral Torah. Everything we have in the Torah is an expansion of that Aleph. What God gave was just the possibility of speech. So in a sense, what this is saying is that the divine wisdom is the possibility of transmission, and all of the specifics are already a later expansion. Let's look at this. This, in a sense, is the opposite. This is from rabbinic sources. God spoke all these words, saying, okay, that's what we have in Exodus at the beginning of the Ten Commandments. Okay, the next verse is, I am the Lord your God. Rabbi Yitzchak said, that which the prophets in every generation were destined to prophesy, they received at Mount Sinai. Even the wise who appear in every generation, each one received his wisdom at Sinai. Even what a student asks his teacher, the Blessed Holy One said to Moses at that time. Okay, this is the entire opposite. According to Exodus, God spoke the Ten Commandments. We just saw a radical reimagining of that. All that God spoke was the Aleph. Here we have the opposite. God spoke all these words. What does that mean, all these words? Not just the words of the Ten Commandments. God conveyed everything that anyone would ever come up with. Any question that you're now putting in the chat, God actually gave that already at Sinai. Okay, this sounds impossible. Did God speak the Aleph or did God speak everything? Okay, two different views spanning the entire spectrum of possible revelation. Either God gave just the possibility of speech or God gave everything. Now, in a sense, what does this mean? Does this make us powerless? Does this mean that nothing we're thinking, nothing we're asking is really our own? It was already given? You could look at it differently. You could say what we come up with, the questions that we have, are actually part of revelation. This process of revelation is ongoing. The process is continual, and we can participate in that unfolding of revelation. Okay, number 7 is from a Kabbalist. Those of you who have seen the Torah scroll, I'm sure almost all of you have, and many of you have been called up to the Torah. Some of you may know how to chant the Torah. The Torah scroll is written without vowels, right? The vowels, of course, are dots and lines above and below the letters, but a Torah scroll can't have vowels. If the vowels are written in the Torah scroll, that Torah scroll is not kosher. So this Jewish mystic is trying to understand why the Torah scroll has to be written without vowels. The Torah scroll is written without vowels so that you can read it variously. Without vowels, the consonants bear many meanings and splinter into sparks. That is why the Torah scroll must not be vowelized, for the meaning of each word accords with its vowels. Once vowelized, the word means just one thing. Without vowels, you can understand it in countless wondrous ways. Okay, here we have obviously a multivalence, okay, a multiplicity of meaning. Of course, the text means one thing. That's what we call the pshat, the simple meaning, the literal meaning. But according to this Jewish mystic, it's important that the words don't have vowels so that you can pronounce them differently, so that you can imagine different possible meanings for the words. This is one way that the Torah ripens. Just the literal meaning itself is an unripened form of Torah. By allowing new interpretation, by stimulating the imagination, we are able to ripen Torah. Let's look at one more passage and then we'll pause for some questions before we go further. Okay, this is really the same idea, but stated a little more tersely. The Torah scroll must not be vowelized so that we can interpret every single word according to every possible reading. Okay, let me stop the share there. And if there are any questions that have come up in the chat, Ari can convey them to me.
Just a few relevant points. One is people are enjoying this class. Second is there really a difference between the two extremes that you pointed out, the Aleph, the silent Aleph as being potential transmission, and the opposite, knowing everything, because maybe it's really the same thing. The Aleph is so powerful that it opens up everything, right? Without the Aleph, there's nothing. With the Aleph, you have everything. So maybe it's so far in two extremes that it's together. So that's what someone
Yeah,
said.
yeah, that's interesting. That's very paradoxical, right? Very dialectical. So that really sounds mystical too. It's interesting. In mathematics, Aleph is actually a symbol for infinity, right? And it's the initial letter of the phrase Ein Sof, the Kabbalistic name for God, infinity. So you could say by speaking the Aleph, by speaking the silent Aleph, it's potentially everything. The only difference is that that other saying is making that explicit. God spelled out everything. So did God speak the Aleph or did he speak the entirety? You could say it's two ends of the spectrum, and there is something simultaneously opposite and equivalent to those.
And just a side note, I took my kids apple picking before Rosh Hashanah. We wanted to make apple cider. And the person there said, well, if you want to make apple cider, you have to go get that fruit that fell from the tree. Don't pick the fruit from the tree.
Mm.
Pick the fruit that fell, and then we'll make that into the apple cider. And that was the sweetest apple cider, just so you know. So it was that fruit that fell, not the fruit you would think you would pick from that tree to get to the
Interesting.
perfection. Hmm.
Interesting.
Um, let's see if we have any other questions. Someone has raised hands, so if you would like to take that. Someone actually brought up
Yeah.
something great. They really enjoyed your explanation of the Gemara working in the Babylonian base 60, and they said, does that explain why when they talk about a dish becoming unkosher, if a milk falls into like
Yes.
a meat soup, it's the 1/60th, so that's the base 10.
That's right. That's right. But batel b'shishim. It's canceled out by 60. If it's 1/60th or less, then it doesn't make it unkosher. Yeah, I'm happy taking some raised hands to hear
Okay, so
people.
we'll try Linda. Let's try you. Go ahead if you have a question.
Yes, if every reading, there are all different readings that you can have if with different vowels, does that mean that every reading is equal? Everything is just as appropriate?
Yeah, it's a great question. Is it legitimate to think of all these readings, to pronounce them, to share them, to teach them? So I would say, we begin with a pshat. We begin with a simple literal meaning, and that somehow takes prominence. But the rabbis already and the mystics even more so don't want to limit it to that. I think you could say that there are countless possible meanings, but it's only those meanings that are really livable. It's only those meanings that really can be followed by a community. Those are the ones that survive. So those become more legitimate. But for your own personal reflection, for your own personal study, I think it's good to multiply the possible meanings.
And we do see in the Midrash and the rabbis play around with words. They change the pronunciation or
Right.
how how the words come out to come up with their own explanation, right?
That's right. The rabbis have this beautiful expression, al tikre. Don't read it as X, read it as Y. And when they say don't read it, they're saying don't read it the way it's spelled, change it a little bit. And they encourage that changing. In fact, it's clear that the rabbis don't always follow the literal meaning, right? The most famous example, I've mentioned this a few times, I'm sure you all know it, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? In the Torah, that probably is meant literally. If I gouge out your eye, my eye should be gouged out. The rabbis couldn't believe that God really intended that. So they reinterpreted it to mean monetary compensation. So they're willing to change the literal meaning, and the Kabbalah is just taking that further. Dina, please.
Hold on, I'll have to just allow her in there. And I'm having challenges here, so hold on. Dina.
You'll
The,
just have to unmute.
yeah. So there, Stephanie said, well, how come when she reads Torah in the shul and she mispronounces the word differently, the people up on the bima correct her if you could pronounce it different ways. So there is a
Yes.
Masoretic way of pronouncing words.
Yeah, Dina, we'll come to you in a second. That's true. Okay, the actual pronunciation, the correct Masoretic pronunciation is safeguarded, and people up on the Bima are very strict about pronouncing it correctly. but Midrash allows for more flexible reading. Dina, please.
I'm so sorry. I'm trying this on the phone for the first time, and it was a miracle I even got to the meeting.
Good.
Now, I was thinking about the actual word, how it looks itself, because I think Hebrew is one of the most beautiful looking languages, and the Aleph is open on all sides. So it lets everything in and lets everything out at the same time. And I just because of the fact that how we have to write the Torah, the scroll without the vowels, but all the beautiful interpretations of the letters when the Torah is being written. It has such to me, it's a very mystical meaning, just the artwork itself, the art of the language of the letters.
Yes, that's fascinating. You know, it's interesting. The Torah begins with which letter? With a bet, right? It's strange. It doesn't begin with the Aleph, it begins with a bet. In some ways, you could say that reflects the dualistic nature of our existence, right? Even though we're talking here about openness and infinity, the rabbis are very aware that we live with limitation. And in fact, there's a midrash that says the Torah begins with a bet, because how is a bet shaped? Like this. You shouldn't ask what's above, you shouldn't ask what's below, you shouldn't ask what came before. Just be here and future directed. The Aleph gives the other possibility. I think let's call on Christopher, and then we'll go back to some of the texts. Please.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that the Torah scroll is written without the vowel markings, because that brings up this question to me. The very first word of the Torah, it's usually read as Bereshit, but then translated as in the beginning. So my question is, if you say Bereshit, doesn't that really mean in a beginning? And then if you wanted in the beginning, you'd read it as Bereshit.
Yes, you're right. Bereshit, it's a very strange word. It really means, you know, it means in a beginning or in a beginning of, or you could say in the beginning of. So it's unclear exactly how to translate it. The Zohar does something very strange with it, because what comes after Bereshit? Bara, created, and then Elohim, God, right? In the beginning, God created. But the actual word order is in the beginning, created, God. Now that's okay because, you know, we say in English, thus spoke the king, it means thus the king spoke. So the verse means in a beginning, in the beginning, God created. The Zohar says no. This means with beginning, because bet can mean in or with. With beginning, it created God. God is actually created. Okay, some of you have heard this from me because some of you were in the class where we just studied this. In with beginning, with the primordial emanation of the divine, the infinite one created what we think of as God. What we think of as God is not the ultimate reality of God. So that's one example of how the mystical midrash can reformulate the word. But you're right. In a beginning, I wrote a book called God and the Big Bang. And there I say maybe it means in a beginning, because there could be multiple beginnings and multiple universes. Okay, let's go back to a little more text, and then we'll return for questions. Okay, let's look at this one. This is from a Kabbalist, number 9. This Kabbalist gives a certain interpretation, and then he reflects on that interpretation. I'm not concerned here with exactly what he said. It's a rather technical matter. It's more that he innovated something, and then he reflected on what he had done. Know that the words of the rabbis, may their memory be a blessing, are the words of the living God, and one should not contradict them. However, it is a mitzvah. Okay, it's a mitzvah. It's a good deed for every wise person to innovate in Torah according to her capacity. Do not think that this particular innovation, okay, he gives an innovation. He says, don't think that this particular innovation of mine is far-fetched. If I hadn't invented it in my mind, I would say that it was transmitted to Moses at Sinai. That's remarkable. Okay, he comes up with a chidush. He comes up with a new interpretation, and he realizes that he made it up. He made up this interpretation, But he says, if I hadn't made it up, I would say it was given to Moses at Sinai. Okay, this takes us back to what we just studied about the Aleph, right? And that wonderful question someone had, is it the same thing to say God gave the Aleph and God gave everything? Okay, God gave the possibility of truth, the possibility of revelation. We might come up with our own interpretations, but somehow our own creativity, our own human creativity, has something to do with a divine gift, right? Really, any artist would say this. A poet, a musician, a sculptor. A poet would often says, you hear poets saying, I didn't write the poem, it came through me, right? I was the channel. Okay, what the Greeks call the muse, being inspired by one of the muses. So creativity somehow participates in divine revelation. And this particular Kabbalist, he's not sure. He realizes it's his own, but he feels somehow it's part of that eternal stream of wisdom. Okay, this is a little midrash number 10. Ben Zoma says, what is written? Okay, we come back to the account of the revelation at Mount Sinai. On the third new moon, after the children of Israel went forth from the land of Egypt, on this day they came to the wilderness of Sinai. It is not written on that day, but rather on this day, as if they came to the wilderness of Sinai today. Every day that you engage in Torah, you should say, it's as if I received it from Sinai on this day. Okay, so what is this saying? The Bible isn't primarily a book of history. It's not saying on that day Israel received the Torah. It says on this day, because we can receive the Torah today. If we are open, okay, from that root kabel, if we are receptive, we can expand the meaning of Torah, we can ripen the Torah, and it's as if by that ripening, the revelation happens right here and now. Okay, emphasizing the present. This is so typical of all mystical teachers, right? To emphasize the eternal now. And here we have it applied to the revelation at Sinai. Okay, before we look at this last passage, let me pause and we'll take a few more questions. If there are any in the chat, otherwise you can raise your hand. The simplest way is if you're on a PC, just press Alt-Y, or on a Mac, Option Y. David and then Jenny. Just have to unmute.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Professor. Thank you. The question I've had this question. It's a Kabbalistic question. I've had it for a while. It's about Jacob and Israel. So I don't know if it fits in exactly with what we're talking about right now. But I've had it for so long and I can't find an answer. And it's more the mystical reason or the mystical happenings as to how Jacob became Israel. And what that really means. I know that Jacob wrestled with the angel of Esav, and he struggled with him, and then Esav marked him on his thigh, and then he was renamed. But I don't know exactly what that means mystically. The closest answer I could get was that because he was marked on the thigh, it was like the sex urge or a physical like the nefesh, what was it? Not the nefesh Elohim, but the nefesh, the physical nefesh.
Yeah.
And it was more Jacob conquering that. But I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if there's anything you can elaborate as to what.
Yeah. I'll just say a word or two. Right. Just to correct you. Right. It's not Esau who, harms him, but the angel himself. Right. So Jacob is wrestling with some being, some divine or semi-divine being. Some people say this is really Jacob wrestling with his own shadow, or maybe he, feels guilty for how he wronged Esau. He's going to reconnect with Esau the next day, and he's wrestling with what he's done with his own nature. I think the most important thing is simply the name of Yisrael, right? He's renamed Israel instead of Jacob because the Torah says, Ki sarita im Elohim, because you wrestled with God. So he's wrestling with something beyond his normal self. He's wrestling with a deeper core of his being, and that wrestling is what transforms him. So it's really a beautiful teaching, those of us who are Jewish, to realize the core of Jewishness is to wrestle with Torah, to wrestle with reality, to wrestle with our image of God, not to be content with our current understanding of God, with our current understanding of our own being, to be constantly in that mode of transformation. Okay, let's continue, Francine and Jenny, and I'll just ask that the questions be fairly brief so that we can call on a few people. Please.
This is not a question, this is a comment. As you were talking, I was thinking of presentism and thinking about the Passover Seder, where one of the children is told, this is what Adonai has done for me. And so it's also in the present, not what was done 5,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's a beautiful example of keeping the focus on the present moment, right? That other beautiful line in the Haggadah, right? Everyone has to see himself, as if he or she personally went forth from Egypt. So this is an enslavement that we should experience. We should realize how we still are enslaved in so many ways, and a liberation. And certainly this applies for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur too. Jenny, please.
Thank you. My question is that, Kabbalah is encouraging looking for many meanings. And I mean, I know that the various, denominations of Judaism, when they learn Torah, they also look for the various meanings. How is the Kabbalistic sort of looking for many meanings different from what might happen in sort of the various denominations of Judaism, or it's more overlap than difference?
Yeah, I would say that, Kabbalah is not a separate sect. Really, it's all the Kabbalists accepted the Torah, they accepted tradition. Many of them were, scholars of the Talmud. So sometimes you hear the view that there's normative Judaism, and then there's, a very different mystical branch of Judaism. It's really not accurate. I would say the Kabbalah is just more intensely spiritual. The Kabbalah is looking for a personal relationship with God. That's there at the core of religion, right? In some ways, you could say mysticism is the core of all religions. Some people view it that, a religion begins with someone's personal spiritual experience. Then you have a tradition that develops. And out of that original revolution, right, all revolutions eventually become conservative. So each religion, as it develops, becomes more and more conservative. In a sense, the mystic is trying to return us to the core religious experience. So demanding something more spiritual, more personal, more direct. It's not different than the religion, it's more intensely religious. Why don't we take one or two from the chat, and then I'll look at the last passage together.
Chat is pretty clear right now. I think
Okay.
to resonate with what Jenny said, when we look, particularly as we get to celebrating the end of reading the whole Torah cycle, and we start again, the same text, yet many times we learn something new. There's always something new to learn. And we see in the traditions like conservative Judaism, Reform Judaism, the statement that, and maybe Orthodox, although Orthodox tends to be more conservative with a small c, that there's this argument that Revelation started but never ended. So Revelation started at Sinai, and it wasn't a moment in history, it is continuous, which ties into continual learning, continual understanding, and what you've been kind of expressing to us today through the teaching on the Kabbalistic approach to Torah.
Right, that's very much the Aleph, that's very much the ripening. Yeah, you also have that you could say you have it with creation, with revelation, and with redemption, that emphasis on the eternal now. You have it with creation, for example, the Garden of Eden, right? It says a river issued from the garden. but the Hebrew puts it in the present tense. A river issues from the garden. V'nahar yotzei me'eden. So creation is a continual process. Revelation, what Ari just said, or you could also think of the blessing when you're called up to the Torah for an aliyah. What's the blessing? Baruch atah Hashem noten haTorah. Blessed are you, O God, who gives the Torah. Not who gave the Torah, but who gives the Torah. And for redemption, for Messiah, that phrase we just looked at, Olam Haba, the world to come. The mystics say it's not the world to come, it's the world that is coming, the world that's coming right now. And the Hebrew can be translated exactly that way, Olam Haba Tamid, the world that's constantly coming. Okay, let's look at the last passage I have here. We ran through these a little more quickly than I imagined. This is from the Zohar, and I'm sure some of you have studied this one with me before. It's one of my favorite passages from the Zohar, but it's worth looking at again. So let's look at it, and I'll ask you to help me unpack it. There was a man who lived in the mountains. He knew nothing about those living in the city. He sowed wheat and ate the kernels raw. One day he entered the city. They offered him good bread. The man asked, "What's this for?" They replied, "It's bread to eat." He ate, and it tasted very good. He asked, "What's it made of?" They answered, "Wheat." Later they offered him thick loaves kneaded with oil. He tasted them and asked, "And what are these made of?" They answered, "Wheat." Later they offered him royal pastry kneaded with honey and oil. He asked, "What are these made of?" They answered, "Wheat." He said, "Surely I am the master of all of these, since I eat the essence of all of these, wheat." Okay, a little parable in the Zohar. The Zohar doesn't really explain it. It leaves that for us to do. That's how the Zohar often teaches. It doesn't spell out the meaning. It leaves open possible meanings. So what's going on with this person? He's a mountain man. Maybe he's a health food addict. He survives just on wheat germ. One day he comes to the city and he actually is offered bread and he likes it. He never tasted it before. He enjoys it, but he wonders what's it made of. They say wheat. Then they give him something a little more developed. Now it's not just bread, maybe it's challah, thick loaves kneaded with oil. He tasted them. He asks, "What are these made of?" They say wheat. Then they give him the ultimate delight, royal pastry kneaded with honey and oil. You could say baklava. Okay, what happens with the baklava? It doesn't actually say he tasted. He just immediately asks, "What are these made of?" They say wheat. He says, "Well, I'm the master of all of these because I eat the essence, wheat." Okay, it's a little bit strange because I guess the question is really, is this person the hero or the villain? Okay, he's gotten to the essence, and that usually is the goal in mysticism, to find the essence. You can't deny that he has the essence, but the Zohar seems to be saying that he's missing out. He's missing out on something. In fact, let me see here. Yeah, there's a concluding line. Because of that view, he knew nothing of the delights of the world, which were lost to him. So it is with one who grasps the principle, but is unaware of all those delectable delights deriving, diverging from that principle. Okay, he has the essence, but he's missing out on everything that it could become. Now, this is probably about Torah. So what does it mean that this person has the essence? Maybe he knows the Torah by heart. He's wedded to the pshat. You could say he's a fundamentalist. And in a way, this parable is a critique on fundamentalism, not Christian fundamentalism, Jewish fundamentalism. This person is so wedded to the pshat that he can't appreciate other meanings. Actually, when he encounters bread, okay, if the wheat kernels are the pshat or the Torah text itself, bread is probably midrash. Bread is the oral Torah. Bread is how the rabbis expand the meaning. And when he tastes that, he likes it. He likes the bread. Then he's given the next layer. The next layer is the challah. That probably corresponds to philosophy, trying to build a view of life around the text. And there he's a little more hesitant. It says he tastes, not he ate, but he asks what's it made of. Then he's given the ultimate delight. The baklava probably here stands for Kabbalah. Some things work better in English than in even the original Aramaic. Baklava is like an anagram of Kabbalah. So what happens when he's offered the baklava? He doesn't even taste it. He just asks what's it made of. And when he's told it's made of wheat, he says, I already know from wheat. So he refuses to get to the ultimate delight because he's so fixated on what he originally understood. That seems to be what the Zohar is saying, but I'd like to ask how it strikes you. So first, let's just say for the next few minutes, questions or comments just related to that parable. And then if we have time, we'll go on to other matters. Zena, did you have something about the parable itself?
Yes.
Please.
When I first read it many years ago, when you offered it to us, just vaguely understood it. I don't know if this is thorough, but today I think of it as he hasn't participated. He's the receiver, and he's just tasted the kernel, what the essence of wheat, but not what man's participation is with God is doing, creating with it, something out of it. And then I was thinking, in Adam and Eve, and then, they were in the Garden of Eden. It doesn't show that they cooked or they created anything. And it's when they were kicked out of the garden. But then they had to create a life for themselves as participants, not just receivers.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's something very activist about Jewish mysticism. Very often you think of mysticism as passive, sitting there, and as we said, kabel means to receive. But Jewish mysticism is an activist mysticism, and that image of the wheat turning into bread and cake and baklava, that is a beautiful example of that. The human creativity is part of that process. So in a sense, the ripening of Torah requires that you do something creative, not just that you take in what's already been told. Great. Let me ask for people to be as brief as possible because there are a lot of hands raised and I'd like to call on people. I'm going to jump ahead now just for a moment, people who haven't participated yet. So David and Susanna, and we'll come back to others very soon. Please, David.
Thank you for the reminder. I remember learning this from you many years ago, and I used to only feel sorry for this person. And now with recent events, I'm more angry at this person and fearful of them because they seem to be there seem to be more people around like that. They see the possibility, but because it challenges their interpretation, they hold on to the lower level and don't open their mind to the other possibilities. And I think that is one of the things that's really quite wrong with the world. And so it's to have someone who tastes it and says, that's pretty good, but I'm going to stick with what I know, seems a tragedy.
Right. Good. He's really a reductionist. He's really fixated. In a sense, you could critique the people in the city too, because what do they say? They just say wheat. They could say wheat, and this is what you do to it. They could encourage him to be a little more participatory, but on his own, he's refusing to leave those narrow confines. Susanna, please. You just have to unmute. Great.
Whoops.
Okay, we got you.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, there was strange things across my screen for a minute. I was surprised that he didn't ask for the recipe. When they said this is made of wheat, I would have expected him to say, well, how do I make this?
Yeah. That, you could critique the people in the city for not telling him. You could critique him for not asking. It's a little bit like stone soup, right? This is a story of stone soup. It's just the stone. No, you also add a little bit, you give of yourself. So either on his part or on the part of the people he encounters, they're not helping him out, and he's not curious. He's not curious enough. Great. Marita.
Hello, it's great to be here, Daniel. I just wanted to say that when I think of this story, I think of how God wanted to express himself and to be known, and how he created he emanated different aspects of himself, like the Shekinah and the world and everything, because God wants to express himself and to be known.
Yeah, the range of possibilities here, that's what's shared in what you said and what the parable is saying and what the ripening is about. The unfolding of all the possibilities is a beautiful name for God in the Kabbalah, the secret of the possible. Sod ha'efshar, right? A name for the Shekhinah. And one has to be open-minded to appreciate that and experience that. Thank you. Joseph, please.
Yes, actually, at first a comment. We were at Brandeis together back in, I was in the class of 73, and I've seen your name many times, and it's the first time I'm having a chance to join with you. It's quite a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was just a few years back.
Just a few
Thank
years
you.
back. This reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever read Soroyan, and there was a book of his, Soroyan's Fables, and this fellow comes walking down the street and sees a fellow playing the guitar, and he's playing one note. And he says to him, when I've seen other people play, their fingers are usually moving all around. And he says, what's going on? And the fellow says to him, well, they're looking for the right note. I found it.
Yeah, it's very, very much a parallel. Thank you. Okay, Anne and Francine and Christopher, and then I just want to say a word or two about my Zohar course, and I think then we'll have to pause till next week. Anne, please.
Well, thank you. It's very thrilling for me. There was a discussion in another community on WhatsApp. Someone said, well, the Buddhists have enlightenment. Do Jews have it? And I said, it isn't a one and done. It feels to me, and this story says it's process, always ongoing, and all possibilities. That feels like it's the essence of it, and it was given to us to have free will and to be able to keep learning and growing all the time. That's why I'm here with you today.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Yeah, I think it may be an illusion, that you ever actually get there to that final state. It's an openness and the unfolding. And we see that here with the emanation of the Sefirot and with the Aleph turning into all the possible meanings. Great. Francine, please.
Yes. Well, many of you are interpreting it a parable in a religious fashion. I am thinking about it as human nature, and of course, in the Torah, there are so many examples of different kinds of human nature. I think in this case there's arrogance on both sides, but the fellow is particularly arrogant because with arrogance and superiority, both of them feel superior over the other. But in this case, he doesn't look into the complexities of life. He's looking at what he can do, what he has done, and therefore that is the correct way, and other ways are not correct. He doesn't look with a wider vision to see the possibilities of what you can do with something that's very simple and how you can make it something just glorious.
Great, great. I think it's great to see it in that psychological way, and we box ourselves in. We're convinced of who we are and that what we know, our perspective is all that matters. So this is a critique of that. Christopher, please.
Yeah, I would suggest that the Torah given by God is like the raw wheat, and that God wants us to complete the Torah through our own insights and creative interpretations.
Yes, very much so. I think that's what the Zohar is really saying. There's actually another parable in the Midrash that a king gave his servants. He gave two servants flax and wheat and asked them to bring it back to him a week later. So a week later, one servant brought back the flax and the wheat, and the other brought back a tablecloth he had woven from the flax and bread he had made from the wheat. And the question is, who does the king appreciate more? So that's Torah. We have Torah. Does God want us just to regurgitate it, to live by the literal meaning, or to expand it? And Midrash and ripening is saying, take it and run with it. Yeah, I thought we would end, but Samuel, please, if you have a question or a thought. You just have to unmute.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think it's interesting that when we eat bread, challah, we don't say Adama, or we don't make a bracha ala chita. We say hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Now with bread, man has to work on it. Man has to grind it. Man has to put it in the oven and you bake it. It's liable to think that we ourselves are doing it. So here we thank God for giving us this ability to do all of this.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful to end on a simple traditional note. Okay, one of the most famous, one of the most well-known of all the blessings. If you eat bread, you say the motzi, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Why don't we say who brings forth the wheat from the earth? God didn't bring forth bread from the earth, but God brought forth the wheat and we turn it into bread. So somehow we're part of that creative process. Again, we come back to process, and the bread has come forth. It's somehow a joint effort. It is a joint effort on the part of the creator and the human participant. So that's wonderful. Okay, let me just say literally a sentence or two about my Zohar course. Ari will send out a brief description that I'm going to give him. A good number of you are in the course or have been in the course. We've been studying Zohar for about the past 6 years, since a year before COVID. And basically, we're working with my English translation, the Zohar Pritzker edition. The Zohar, of course, is the masterpiece of the Kabbalah, a mystical commentary on the Torah. And we read a few pages each week, and something like this I teach, and then we have discussion. So those of you who are interested, you can take a look on my website. The class is going to resume in a few weeks on Tuesday, October 21st. We meet weekly Tuesday evenings, 7 to 8:15 Eastern Time, 4 to 5:15 Pacific. And you can see there sample videos and information about how to enroll and all of that. So great to begin this exploration, and we'll continue in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Thank you, Ari, for arranging this. And if you have any closing words, bavakasha.
I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. Terrific participation today, great questions, great additions. You are a terrific group. I'm very happy. It's been a hard year for everybody, I think, certainly for many people I know, for myself and my family. Everything going on in the world, I think learning Torah together is a way to bring in some light. So I feel like we got some light today going into Rosh Hashanah. I wish you all a happy, healthy, enlightened year. A year we can't rest on our laurels, but must learn and learn more. So thank you all. Shana Tova. See you in 5786. Thank you, Professor Matt. Take care, everybody.
Shana Tova.
And enjoy. Bye-bye.
Great.